Subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon to never miss any update from Rouse IAS Study Circle. Join the only official Telegram channel of Rouse IAS Study Circle to get the relevant materials and important updates. Hello and welcome to the Daily News Simplified. The what, why, and how of the newspaper analysis from the Civil Services Examinations perspective. So today we are going to discuss The Hindu Daily Edition dated 31st January 2022. The topics to be discussed have been displayed on your screen and the timestamping of the same has been provided in the description box below. Now we'll start with our discussion. Our first topic has appeared in today's newspaper at page number 11, and this topic talks about the recent bomb cyclone which has appeared and hit the eastern coast of USA. So the concept and the details of this topic, that is the bomb cyclone, is mostly relevant from the UPSC scheme of syllabus of General Studies paper 1, because in that section we have a micro section of important geophysical phenomena such as earthquakes, tsunamis, volcanic activities and cyclones. Moreover, in the previous year UPSC have several times asked the questions from the cyclones and the other geophysical phenomena as well. For example, in UPSC 2016, the question was asked with the relation of the concept of air masses. In 2015, the question was asked regarding the factors which are responsible for the origin of ocean currents, and more importantly, the concept of ocean currents was linked with the influence and variation in the regional climates. That what are the impacts of ocean currents on the variation of regional climates? And if you closely analyze, there is similarity between these two questions. Because in this question also the concept of air masses was linked to its role in the macroclimatic changes. Further, in 2014, the question was directly asked from the tropical cyclones. The question was in relation to the specific location of the tropical cyclones, that why these cyclones are largely confined to South China Sea, Bay of Bengal and Gulf of Mexico. So we'll come to these questions once we are done with this session also, because I want to tell you a very important thing, that how today's session will help you to understand the narrow dimensions, the key points which you can write in these two particular questions also. So now let us begin the understanding of the basic concepts which are related to the bomb cyclones. So under this session we are going to discuss the bomb cyclones, its concept, its formation and its relative motion with the help of this diagram. We will understand the key concepts and factors which are governing in this particular bomb cyclones, that is the ocean currents, air mass, fronts, polar vortex and the phenomena of bombogenesis. So now let us begin our detailed discussion about this topic. So now first we will try to imagine with the help of an animation that how the winds move in this bomb cyclones. Now you can see the two air masses which are coming towards each other. The one is from the Canadian side, that is the northern side, which is the cold air, and one is from the tropical warm water, that is the warm air. These two air masses collide with each other and form a low pressure which is known as the bomb cyclone on the eastern coast of USA. Now if you closely look towards the relative direction of the motion of this bomb cyclone, it is towards the northeast. The cyclone moves towards the north along the eastern coast of USA, and finally it also impacts at the western coast of Europe, especially in the coastal waters of England. So this is a rough map of that particular region which tries to demonstrate that how the two air masses collide with each other and why do they move towards the western coast of Europe and towards the coastal waters of England. That is this particular region. But we will come to this map later on. First we will try to understand that what are the basic key concepts which play their important role in generation of the bombogenesis and its further movement. So first of all, you need to understand that what do we exactly mean by ocean currents. Yes, I agree that many of you will be knowing this, but for those people who do not know this, the ocean currents are the continuous and directed movement of the sea water within an ocean. For example, this particular region is concerned, this is the Atlantic region, this is the North Atlantic Ocean and this is the South Atlantic Ocean. Now we all know that this complete area is full of water, but still we have which is known as the Gulf Stream. The Gulf Stream is the ocean current which moves in the direction as shown in this figure. So what happens is that the ocean currents are the type of rivers in the oceans. These ocean currents are primarily of two types. One are the cold ocean currents and the other is the warm ocean currents. Obviously, the cold and warm has to do something with the thermal nature of the ocean currents. If the temperature of the ocean currents are lower, those will be called as cold currents, and if the temperature of those currents are higher, those will be known as the warm currents. So the Gulf Stream which we talked about in the previous diagram, it is of the warm nature. Now there are several factors which are there behind the origination of the ocean currents and further the modification of the ocean currents. So now here we are not going in details of the ocean currents, but yes, for the sake of understanding, let us take one example, one factor which is responsible for the origination of the ocean currents, which is the solar heat. Now we all know that because of the solar heat, the water temperature rises, and because of the rise in the water temperature, the water expands. Now, if you visualize, the expansion of the water on the ocean surface will push the water in various directions. And this water will be taken into that particular direction in which the wind is dominating in that region. For example, in the previous diagram, we have the Gulf Stream. Now, the Gulf Stream is moving in this particular direction under the dominant influence of westerly winds because the winds move in such direction. That is why this moving wind in this direction carries with itself the water of the Gulf Stream in this particular direction. Now the second concept is related to the air mass. You need to understand that what exactly are the air mass. Now the air masses are the large volume of the air which originates in a particular area. But the important point is that this complete volume, this complete mass of the air has uniform and homogeneous physical conditions. By physical conditions here I mean, for example, temperature, humidity, direction, etc. Now for the proper air masses to be developed, we also need a flat, extensive, homogeneous land surface. For example, the air masses which will be developed over the Siberian region. For example, the air masses which can develop over the Sahara region. So now here again, if you closely understand, I have taken the examples of two regions. One is the Siberia and the other is the Sahara. The basic difference between these two things are that it is of cold nature and Sahara is of warm desert. So again, the air masses is also of two types, that is cold air mass and warm air mass. Clear? Now we come to the third important topic, that is fronts. Now what are fronts? The fronts are the sloping boundaries between two contrasting and converging air masses. Now this term is very important. The fronts can form only in those regions where two air masses are colliding, but those two air masses have to be contrasting in nature. For example, we have two winds on the equator. Suppose this is 0 degree latitude, that is equator, and the wind is coming in this direction. These are tropical easterly winds, but both these winds are similar in characteristics because these winds are warm in nature, because both of these are tropical easterlies. This means that the fronts will not be generated on the equator. But if you go to the middle latitudes, here you have the winds coming from the cold polar areas, and from the below you have the winds coming from the lower latitudes, that is warm in nature. So this particular area will form the front because now the air masses are converging, are colliding with each other, but both the air masses are of opposite nature, that is the contrasting nature. So I hope the front is also clear. Now we'll come to the fourth important concept, which is the polar vortex. Now this topic is also very much in news. However, the phenomena of the polar vortex is not very new. The only reason that why this topic is more in news is because under the influence of the global warming and the rising global temperature, the phenomena of the polar vortex has risen. So first you understand that what do we mean by the polar vortex? Now, polar vortex are the strong westerly winds in the stratosphere, and these strong westerly winds enclose a large pool of cold air. We'll understand this with the help of a diagram. Now, this is a stable polar vortex. If you closely look at this diagram, this is the direction of the jet stream, that is the polar jet stream. Always remember that the polar vortex are always found on the poles. They are not found anywhere else. So what is happening is that this polar jet stream is acting as an outer band, that is the outer wall, which is restricting the cold air within it. This is the cold air and this is the polar vortex. But presently, what is happening? Because of the rise in the vehicular emissions and industrial emissions and various other anthropogenic activities, the global temperature is increasing, which we call as the phenomena of global warming. Now, because of this global warming, the wind temperature is also rising. Now, if you look that these polar vortex can always be found and will be stable when we have a cold polar jet stream, because this cold polar jet stream will be able to dominate itself and restrict this cold air within its outer band. But if these cold polar jet streams weaken, and how can they weaken? They will get weakened because of the rising temperatures. So, what is happening is that because of the global warming, the warm air is moving towards the pole. The temperature of the higher latitudes are rising. And this warm air disrupts these polar jet streams, and these polar jet streams form the meander as shown in this diagram. Now, if you compare these two diagrams, in the earlier diagram, the cold wind was restricted to this region only. But now, because of the southward meandering of these polar jet streams, this cold air moves towards south. And that is what exactly happens in USA. In the months of the winters, because of the disruption of the polar vortex, the cold air which was earlier contained within the band of the polar jet stream, those winds move towards south, and that is why the cold wind from the region of the Canada comes towards the region of the US. So by now we have discussed four important concepts, that is the ocean currents, air mass, fronts and polar vortex. Now we'll come to our topic, that is the bombogenesis. What do we mean by bombogenesis? Now bombogenesis is a phenomena which leads to the generation and development of bomb cyclone. Now, what are bomb cyclones? Bomb cyclones are also the extratropical cyclones. These extratropical cyclones are also called as temperate cyclones or are also called as frontal cyclones. Now, why these cyclones are called as frontal cyclones? Now, if we go by the basics, we know that cyclones are of two types. One are the tropical cyclones and other are the extratropical or the temperate cyclones. The reason for the generation of the tropical cyclones is because of the intense convection, which in turn is because of the intense solar heating. But the reason for the development of the temperate cyclone is the development of fronts. And what are fronts? We have recently discussed that fronts are the sloping boundaries between two contrasting air masses. So obviously these fronts will be developed at the temperate areas in the middle latitudes, because only in those areas air masses can be of contrasting nature, one from the polar side and one from the subtropical side, that is cold and warm. Clear? So again, these bomb cyclones are the frontal cyclones. This means that these cyclones can be developed only in the mid latitude region, and they can be developed only due to the formation of fronts. Clear? But the important key fact related to the bomb cyclones and the other frontal cyclones, which are the normal frontal cyclone, is that the pressure of the bomb cyclones deteriorates at a very excessive rate. The reduction of the temperature in the bomb cyclone is around 24 millibar in just one day, that is 24 hours. So this excessive rate of reduction of the tropical cyclones make the bomb cyclones very intense and fierce. And now, because we know that these cyclones are taking place because of the cold air masses and in the seasons of winter, these strong rotating column of winds of the bomb cyclones lead to the formation of the blizzards. Blizzards are the intense cold winds which lead to the huge snowfall in those regions. And that is why it disrupts the weather and makes the life of the people in those regions difficult. Now these bomb cyclones are also called as nor'easters. Why they are called as nor'easters? We'll discuss it. And the third thing is, because we have discussed that the rate of the falling of pressure is so high that they are difficult to forecast. Because in just 24 hours, the reduction of the pressure is around 24 millibars. So that is why they are difficult to forecast, which in turn exaggerates the problems which are to be faced by the people of that area. Now, if you have understood all these concepts, let us apply these concepts on the area of the USA with the help of the diagram which we discussed. Now, in this particular area, in the season of winters, because we know in the seasons of winter, the cold continental air masses from the areas of Canada come southwards towards USA. Further, because of the weakening of the polar vortex, the cold winds which were there confined within the regions of the polar jet streams also come down heavily in the area of USA. Now, from the northwards, the cold continental air masses are coming. And from southwards, because here we have tropical warm waters, the air mass which is to be developed in this particular region will be of warm nature, and that is moving towards north. So, therefore, in around this particular region, a front is formed because the two contrasting air masses are colliding with each other. And as soon as the fronts are formed, it leads to the development of the temperate cyclones. The pressure develops with a very huge rate up to an extent of 24 millibars within 24 hours. Further, the Coriolis force also plays its role in rotating the wind column. Now, once these cyclones are formed, they move in this particular direction towards the west coast of Europe and the coastal waters of UK. So, this is how a bomb cyclones are formed on the eastern coast of USA. Now, why these cyclones are called as nor'easters? Now, these are called northeasters because the winds are coming from the northeast direction. Once the low pressure is formed and the cyclones start to rotating, now just observe the direction of the winds. The wind is coming from the colder areas towards the lower latitudes in this direction. So this is the northeast and this is the southwest, and that is why, because the winds are named on the basis from the direction from which they are coming. That is why the winds are named as northeasters. Further, these winds are developing on the eastern coast of USA. This is also one of the reasons calling these as nor'easters. Now I hope this topic is very clear. Let us have a brief revision of this topic once again. Under this session, we discussed the important key concepts and factors which are related to the development of the bomb cyclones, which were the ocean currents, air mass, fronts, polar vortex, and bombogenesis. In the bombogenesis, we discussed that these are the extratropical or the temperate or the frontal cyclones, which are formed due to collision of the two contrasting air masses. These are mainly developed in the winters because the thermal contrast between the cold air mass coming from the northern region and the warm air mass coming from the tropical region is very high. This thermal contrast leads to development of vigorous fronts, which in turn drops the pressure to 24 millibars within 24 hours. And that is why these cyclones are very intense and fierce in nature. These cyclones are also called as nor'easters because of the direction of the wind which is taking place in this particular region. These cyclones further move towards the northeast and hits the western coast of Europe and the coastal waters of UK, and hence they bring the climatic changes in not only the coast of the US but also the coast of Europe. Now in the end we'll come back to the questions which were asked in previous year UPSC, and why did I say that this particular topic will give you one very important dimension. See, in question 1 in 2016 the UPSC asked that discuss the concept of the air masses. We have discussed that what are air mass, and then it asked that explain its role in macroclimatic changes. Now in this topic we have discussed that how air masses are leading to the development of the bomb cyclones on the eastern coast of USA, as well as how they impact on the western coast of Europe. So that is the role of air mass in bringing the climatic changes. Similarly, in 2015 the question was asked that how the ocean currents influence the regional climates. Now, if you go back to this diagram, we discussed that there we had a Gulf Stream, and this Gulf Stream had an important role in formation of the temperate cyclones, particularly the bomb cyclones, which in turn had its impact again on the eastern coast of US and the western coast of Europe. So that is how you need to read about the topics. From one very topic, you get multiple dimensions which you can use in multiple questions. One topic is not restricted to that particular dimension only. Always keep this thing in your mind. Now, from the technical topic, we have come to a purely philosophical topic. This topic has appeared on page number 6 in the article section. The topic is about the Mahatma Gandhi and his teaching to us and the whole world. The topic reads that the Mahatma Gandhi was one of the out of the box thinkers. As you all are aware that recently there was the 74th anniversary of the Mahatma Gandhi's death, which has provided us an opportunity to think about his character and contributions as an important figure of the world history. And from the syllabus perspective, this topic purely falls under the General Studies paper 4, which is the ethics, integrity and aptitude. Under the micro section of this syllabus, UPSC has mentioned two important things. The first subpart, the micro section of this syllabus, reads the human values, lessons from the lives and teachings of the great leaders, reformers, and administrators. And similarly, the second micro section talks about the contributions of the moral thinkers and philosophers from India and the world. So that is why there are two subtopics in the paper of the ethics whereby we can fit this topic. And in this continuation in today's session, we will talk about the important opinions and point of views which are taken by the author in this particular article, and we'll see that why the author has called Mahatma Gandhi as the out of the box thinker. Now, for the people who have studied modern history, they will relate to all the things which we will discuss with certain and concrete examples. And for those people who have still not read modern history, I will take few examples and will try to explain those examples in brief so that you understand that how the practical relevance of Mahatma Gandhi's principle helped India and its people to attain independence, and not only restricted to independence, Gandhian principles also help one to transform himself or herself. So, now let us look at some of the important principles and ideas which dominated the Gandhian personality. Now, first of all, I would like to know that how many of you know the book that is Autobiography written by Mahatma Gandhi. Now take few seconds and try to decode the meaning, the deep meaning of this very name. Leave aside the content of the book. Many of you might have read this book and many of you might not have read this book, but just look at the name of this book, My Experiments with Truth. Now, why this name is important? The author in this article says that Mahatma Gandhi was, unlike others, very open-minded person. He was open to each and every opinion, no matter how much he disagreed with it, but he always welcomed the ideas coming from any side, any culture, any society, or any person. And therefore, he was very interested in reading the concepts and content of the various opinions. He was very inquisitive as far as the different viewpoints were concerned. And that is why in his autobiography also Mahatma Gandhi has experimented with lot of ideas, and that is why it is said that he was a perpetual seeker of truth. In this very book Mahatma Gandhi has himself told that how much he was influenced, for example, by Bhagavad Gita. Mahatma Gandhi, unlike others, did not only understood the Bhagavad Gita from the religious perspective, but he was more interested in understanding the concepts of the Bhagavad Gita from the spiritual point of view. Further, he also tried to implement the principles of the Gita ethics in his personal life. So that is why it is said that he was a very open-minded person and he was a soft reader of all the concepts. Now, the second important dimension of this author is the association of Mahatma Gandhi with the weakest and the poorest section of the society. Now, if you closely analyze the India's modern history, the freedom struggle, India was never short of leaders. We had Lal Bahadur Shastri, we had Bhagat Singh, we had Jawaharlal Nehru, we had Subhash Chandra Bose, we had Motilal Nehru, and the list will never end. However, there were very few leaders like Mahatma Gandhi, like Vivekanand, who were aware about the fact that they must associate themselves with the common people of this country. Because if there is no association, if there is friction, if there is a lot of gap between the common people and the leader, then it might happen that the core issues of those common people do not reach to the leader. But as we have discussed in the point number one, that Mahatma Gandhi was open-minded personality, and that is why he was always interested in talking to the common masses. He was always interested in knowing the real problems and issues which they face. And that is why he always associated himself with the weakest and the poorest section of the society. Just have an image of Mahatma Gandhi in your mind. The picture which you get is a weak, slim person wearing a dhoti and upper body is completely naked. Now, that particular dress was something which the common people of our India associated with. And that was one of the biggest reasons behind the popularity and the love towards Mahatma Gandhi in the minds and hearts of our common people. The third important idea which this author has made is that Mahatma Gandhi was the chief doubter of the oppressive system. Now, many of you must be aware about the constructive works which Mahatma Gandhi took. Now, what happened was that post civil disobedience movement, that is 1932, when the movement was brutally crushed by the British, the INC faced a threat that what should it do now? And in this very context, if you are little aware about the events that took place in that particular time frame, there was a Pune Pact. Pune Pact was shared between B.R. Ambedkar and Mahatma Gandhi, which was in relation to providing reservation to the scheduled castes and Dalit populations. So under this backdrop, Mahatma Gandhi was the one who pushed the Congress to took the constructive works. These constructive works were in relation to empowerment and upliftment of the downtrodden section of our society. And that is why at that time Mahatma Gandhi raised his voice against the oppressive social system which in the name of Indian culture was practiced. He gave many speeches against the oppressive system. He tried to mold hearts of the higher caste society. He also tried to change and transform the practices of the lower caste in order to build the social harmony. Further, the next important view is the personality of the Mahatma Gandhi was very simple and transparent. He was the one who not only challenged but also changed the definition of the leadership. As we have already discussed, that Mahatma Gandhi associated himself with the weakest and the poorest section. His simple and transparent mode of life, for example, he was very fond of living together. He was very fond of community life. And in this very regard, he took the ashram system of the Indian culture forward and made the ashram system at the base of the political transformation of India. So Mahatma Gandhi was the one who did not only believe but also acted upon the principle of simple living and high thinking. The next important thing is that Mahatma Gandhi believed that there is no absolute truth. And instead of having an absolute or rigid perception of truth, he was a perpetual truth speaker. That is why I started this session with the name of his autobiography, which he himself writes, My Experiments with the Truth. Because all his life he has experimented with truth and he has sought to seek the real meaning of truth. That is why he believed that there is no absolute truth. And this viewpoint is very relevant in our modern times. Next thing was that he took various steps to promote this civilizational awareness among Indian masses. And also he took the path of spiritualism. If you find some time and if you go by this book, you'll understand that what did he exactly meant. How did the idea of spiritualism transform Mahatma Gandhi as a person? How did spiritualism build the base of Mahatma Gandhi's personality? How it helped Mahatma Gandhi to decide what is wrong and what is right? And because of this spiritualism and civilizational ethics which Mahatma Gandhi had, he was a core devotee of non-violence. Because he believed that violence in any form is detrimental for not only the person but for the whole society. And if we have to promote spiritualism, we have to take non violence as our weapon. Further, he was also of the firm opinion that India's civilization has never ever supported the violent activities. And through all these principles and practices, Mahatma Gandhi tried to transform himself, and he also advocated that the self transformation should be the real goal of human mind. So, if you take all these dimensions into account, you will understand that why this author has called Mahatma Gandhi as the person at that time who had out of box thinking. He was the only one who was promoting non-violence. He gave the idea of satyagrah. He supported the principle of truth. And that is why it is said that the contributions of Mahatma Gandhi and the leaders for that matter at that particular point of time can never be ignored because they were fundamental in building the modern India. Moving on to our next topic, which has appeared on page number 1. This topic is from the Polity section. Though the broader context of this topic is related to the Pegasus issue, which you all might be aware about it, but in the backdrop of Pegasus issue, the micro topic which this article says is that the opposition has demanded the privilege motion against the information technology minister. So from the polity perspective, in today's session we will discuss all the dimensions associated with the privilege motion. As far as the UPSC syllabus is concerned, the preliminary examination mentions the subsection of Indian Polity and Governance Constitution. Under this topic, every year in prelims, several MCQs are asked, and so in that sense, today we will discuss the privilege motion. So in order to first discuss about the privilege motion, first we need to understand that what do we mean by privileges. Now, as the name suggests, that privileges are the certain rights or immunities which are enjoyed by the members of the parliament as well as the state legislatures. These rights and immunities are provided to the MPs or MLAs or the states having the legislative councils, the MLCs, so that they can carry out their functions effectively without any external pressure. Because if certain extra rights and immunities are not provided to the members of parliament, there might be some external threat because of which they might not speak anything or give their 100% in the houses. So that is why, in order to allow them to discharge their functions efficiently and effectively, certain rights and immunities are provided to them, and these rights and immunities are called parliamentary privileges. As far as the Indian Constitution is concerned, Article 105 mentions the privileges which are provided to the members of the parliament, and Article 194 provides the privileges to the members of the state legislature. But one very important thing is that despite mentioning in the constitution, the parliament has not yet codified the privileges available to members. And this non-codification of privileges is one of the biggest reason behind the misuse of these privileges by the member of the houses. So till now we have discussed that what are the privileges. These are rights and immunities which are enjoyed by the members of parliament. Now the question arises that then what is a breach of privilege? The breach means that when any of the rights and immunities which are provided to the members of parliament is disregarded by anyone, including the members of the parliament, that offense is known as the breach of privilege. And if this breach of privilege is committed, a notice is moved in the form of a motion by any member of either house against those being held guilty of breach of privilege. Now, this fact is very important that the notice is moved in the form of motion by any member of either house. This may include the publishing of the news items, editorials, or statements made in newspapers, magazines, TV interviews, or in public speeches. Further, each house, that is Lok Sabha or Rajya Sabha, and their counterparts in the state legislature, each house claims the right to punish as contempt actions which, while not breach of any specific privilege, are the offences against its authority and dignity. That means the contempt actions might not target the specific privilege, but they might be general in nature. And if the breach of privilege is concerned, the motion on privilege starts. This is what is called as privilege motion. As we have discussed, that any member in any house may, with the consent of the chair, that is, in case of Lok Sabha, we have speaker, and in case of Rajya Sabha, we have the chairman. So, with the consent of the speaker or the chairman, as the case may be, the member may raise a question involving a breach of privilege either of a member of the house or a council or of any committee. And there are certain conditions also. The member which moves the privilege is required to give the notice in writing to the Secretary General of that very house. Now, there are certain conditions applicable on the motion of privileges, and these conditions are threefold. The first is that not more than one question shall be raised at the same sitting. Second is that the question shall be restricted to a specific matter of recent occurrence. And the third is that the matter requires the intervention of the House or the Council. And for granting the permission, which we call as leave, to grant the leave, these points are important. If the Speaker or Chairman gives the consent and holds that the matter proposed to be discussed is in order, shall then call the member concerned to ask for the leave to raise the question. However, the Speaker or the Chairman can also refuse to give the consent to raise the question. That means that the power to give the consent or to deny the consent to the leave depends on the Speaker or the Chairman. And a specific process is also followed for this. The Speaker or the Chairman requests those members who are in favor of the leave being granted. If those members are not less than 25 in case of Lok Sabha as well as Rajya Sabha, they rise and vote in favor of the leave. The Speaker or the Chairman shall declare that the leave is granted. And if the strength is below 25, the Speaker or the Chairman shall inform the member that such member does not have the leave of the House. And in this continuation, let us suppose that if the leave is being granted, then it may be referred to the Committee on Privileges. This committee is formed in order to examine and investigate the report. This committee consists of 15 members, that is why it is a 15-member committee, which is nominated by the Lok Sabha Speaker, and it examines every issue involving the breach of privilege. Further, after this examination, it also provides the requisite recommendations. Similarly, in case of Rajya Sabha, the chairman shall nominate a committee of privileges consisting of 10 members. Now, this is a factual difference which you need to remember in order to tackle such options in prelims. So, in Lok Sabha, it is a 15-member committee, and in Rajya Sabha, it is a 10-member committee. The privilege committee has the power to take the evidence or call for papers, records, or documents, including the attendance of the persons. And in the end, the committee shall present its report to the Speaker or the Chairman, as the case may be, in the respective houses of the Parliament. So, this was a very factual topic relating to parliamentary processes in which we have discussed the privilege motion. I hope this topic is clear to you and you will be able to solve the MCQs based on this thing. Moving to the next topic, which has appeared in page number 4. This topic is in relation to the migratory birds. And the context of this topic is that the news mentioned that in the state of West Bengal, despite having some arid areas, there are several migratory birds which have migrated from the Central Asian region to those areas. The most important area mentioned in today's news article is the Kulik bird sanctuary. So that is why this topic is mostly relevant from the prelims point of view. As you can see here that previously several map-based questions have been asked. For example, in UPSC 2020, the question was asked in which you had to link the species and the national park. The question said that which one of the following protected areas is well known for the conservation of a subspecies of the Indian swamp deer, that is also known as Barasingha, that thrives well on the hard ground and is exclusively graminivorous. Similarly, in UPSC 2018, the question was asked that in which of the following states is the Pakhui Wildlife Sanctuary located. So in this very sense, there might be question also that in which one of the following states is the Kulik Bird Sanctuary, which is mentioned in this news article, is located. So this particular sanctuary is located in the state of West Bengal. However, we will not restrict ourselves to the Kulik Bird Sanctuary only. We will study the important national parks and the wildlife sanctuary of the state of West Bengal. Now there are many wildlife sanctuaries in the state of West Bengal, but few are very important which are there in news. So let us begin. First of all the national parks are important. So first we'll see the important national parks of the state of West Bengal. The first is the Neora Valley National Park. It is in the northern region. Second is the Jaldapara National Park, again in north or northeastern region, and nearby it is the Buxa National Park. Further, in this very region, we also have the Gorumara National Park. In the southern West Bengal state, everyone knows this, we have Sundarban National Park. And further, one national park in the northern areas remaining, that is Singalila National Park. So there are 6 national parks in the state of West Bengal. Now we'll come to the important wildlife sanctuaries. We'll look and try to memorize the wildlife sanctuaries and location on the basis of the image which you are seeing and try to establish this very image in your mind. Now here we have the Buxa Wildlife Sanctuary. Second, this is known as the Raiganj Wildlife Sanctuary, which is commonly known as Kulik Wildlife Sanctuary, which is mentioned in today's news piece. So again I am repeating it. The Kulik Wildlife Sanctuary is also known as the Raiganj Wildlife Sanctuary. Next important location is the Halliday Wildlife Sanctuary. Now this wildlife sanctuary is also very important from the examinations point of view because many a times it is also in news. Next we also have West Sundarban Wildlife Sanctuary and the Lothian Islands Wildlife Sanctuary. Further, on the basis of the name of the river, in the northern state of West Bengal, we also have Mahananda Wildlife Sanctuary. So these are some of the important national parks and wildlife sanctuaries in the state of West Bengal, and you are required to memorize these. Now we'll come to the reference article. This article, which reads as an advice for the finance minister in the context of the global minimum tax on MNCs. Now this article has appeared in today's newspaper at page number 7, which talks about the rationale behind the global minimum tax and what can India do. Now this complete topic was comprehensively covered by Baswa sir in the DNS of Article 27th April 2021, whereby it was discussed that what is the proposal of the USA, what is the rationale that why the global minimum tax is required. Further, in this very regard, the India's position was also explained, and finally from the perspective of the critical analysis, Baswa sir had discussed that what are the existing challenges in the global minimum corporate tax structure. So that is why I request you to go back to the DNS dated 27th April 2021 in order to revise this topic comprehensively. And in the end, now we will discuss the question of the day. The question asked in yesterday's DNS was related to the term magnetars. The question said that the magnetars, a term seen sometimes in news, is related to which of the following options. So out of this, option D, that is the dense stars having strong magnetic field, is the correct answer. The question for the today is in relation to the parliamentary privileges. There are 2 statements given. The statement 1 says that privileges in parliament are governed by the constitutional provisions, and the statement 2 says that the President of India is also subjected to the privilege of the houses. You have to find the correct statements out of these 2 statements. So that's all for today. Thank you. All the best. Study hard.